Sakurai said there's not going to be that many more newcomers, seeing as Smash Ultimate brings back every veteran, which is amazing. I'd actually kind of prefer that. But that said, there's still newcomers coming, so I want to try to guess at them. A lot of people are doing this, and there's, leaks and fake leaks and speculation all over the internet, but certain characters can kind of get passed over. And there's one character in particular I'd like to talk about today who I don't see too many people speculating about, but I actually think has a really good shot at getting in this game. That character is Mach Rider. Mach Rider is an old NES game. I believe it was an arcade game for a while too. It's not a super popular game, but it was one that, in the past, Sakurai, at least specifically for Melee, said that he's considered the character. I think he chose Ice Climbers, as Sakurai always tends to choose some sort of retro rep. But Mach Rider was one of the possibilities. I think one of the most difficult things for Melee was implementing that bike, but in Brawl, Wario got a motorcycle, so it's definitely doable, especially at this point. So the reason I think Mach Rider has a good shot at this game is a couple of reasons. One, my main guess for retro rep before E3 was Takamaru. I think a lot of people were guessing at Takamaru. Sakurai had mentioned him, and there's no samurai character in Smash, so it seemed like a pretty good retro rep. But lo and behold, E3 comes out, and Takamaru gets deconfirmed. He's an assist trophy this time. So I think a lot of people are now kind of thinking maybe we won't get a retro rep. And while I don't think you should definitely follow patterns in Smash, there's not really anything else for us to go off of speculation-wise. There's also a reason for those patterns. Sakurai, I think, tries to sprinkle characters throughout, different timelines. Like, if an older fan is going to recognize old NES reps, whereas a newer fan might only recognize characters from the Wii era and up. So I think Sakurai makes a conscious choice to try to make the newcomers a good array of different characters from all over the Nintendo timeline. So Mach Rider would be a pretty good retro rep if you buy into the idea that we will get a retro rep. I will say the past has shown that we do tend to get retro characters. It's something Sakurai does tend to do. So whether or not he'll continue this pattern in a game where he's explicitly said he's not going to add too many more newcomers, who's to say, but there's a little bit more evidence for Mach Rider than just that we're missing a retro rep. The main thing is back in, I believe the earliest article I could find was December 2016. Sakurai was doing an interview where he said he bought a figure, a robot figure, from the series VFAM or VIFAM, I'm not sure the pronunciation, and he bought it because he wanted the gun to use to model for a game that he was working on. At the time, I don't think anyone knew what game Sakurai was working on, but we've since found out that Smash Bros. Ultimate has been in development since 2015. So December 2016, perfectly right in the middle for when he'd be working on this. The VFAM robot figure came with this gun, and the gun was what Sakurai wanted from it. Most people immediately jumped onto Xenoblade Chronicles X as what the robot figure was probably going to be used for. I think most people chose that because it was a robot, and they didn't really look at the gun itself. The robots in Xenoblade Chronicles are called Skells, and Elma, one of the main protagonists of the game, has a Skell that uses a gun. So most people jumped onto that, but looking at her Skell, I don't think it looks much like the gun from the VFAM figure that Sakurai bought. In fact, I think the gun looks a lot more like Mach Rider's gun. Now, obviously, if we're going to update Mach Rider, the gun might look kind of different from his gun, and, the Skell, if you're just using a robot toy, you're not going to get the perfect gun. So, it could be either or, but what I'm thinking is that if Elma's in the game, she probably only uses the Skell for, like, a final smash or, some sort of big moment type thing. And we found out since E3 that final smashes are actually just going to be more like cutscenes. Characters that once transformed, like Little Mac, now don't transform. Wario doesn't transform. They're just kind of cutscenes now. I think Sakurai said it's more getting to the point. So most of these are just you hit the character with the final smash attack and it just plays a scene. So if Elma was in and had her Skell, I'm kind of thinking it would be for her final smash. And if it's just a cutscene, I don't think Sakurai needs the gun to model for that. Sakurai's not a 3D programmer. He's a visionary. He's coming up with ideas for the characters. And I don't think he's buying, models for every single thing in the game, all the items and stages and stuff. He's not sitting there needing to 3D model something and needing something in front of him to do that. What Sakurai needs is like a figure so that if he says, oh, when Mach Rider jumps, he's going to hold the gun like this, or he's going to hold it up in the air like this. He needs to be able to visually look at that and find out where that item that the character is always going to be holding will be. Elma, you wouldn't need like a rifle gun for, but Mach Rider you would. So I'm really thinking Mach Rider is what that gun is for. Another thing is, I think maybe the main retro rep that most people are latching onto right now is it's Excitebiker, or Excitebike, whatever you want to call it, Duck Hunt, whatever Sakurai decides. That's what most people are guessing at, and while that's probably the biggest Nintendo Entertainment System character that we don't have in Smash yet, I'm kind of thinking you can't make a great moveset for a Excitebiker. It's not really a fighter. But what you could do is what Sakurai did with Duck Hunt, which is Sakurai took Duck Hunt and he kind of added Wild Gunman to it. He kind of represented both games. I mean, it was really a representation of the Zapper light gun. So I'm kind of thinking Mach Rider, since he uses a motorcycle anyway, could represent Mach Rider, but also have things from Excitebike. Excitebike has some cool classic NES sounds to it, going over jumps, things like that. You could add it to Mach Rider's moveset. You could give him an alternate costume that kind of looks like the color scheme for an Excitebiker. Anything like that, I think would look really, really good and could represent both really, really well. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, is that Mach Rider is going to be our Excitebike rep as well as our Mach Rider rep. He just works better as a fighter. He's from the year 2112. He fights... I'm not sure if it's even aliens. It wasn't really clear, but Earth has been invaded. It's kind of a Mad Max-looking, desolate post-apocalypse world where Mach Rider rides around on his quad runner and tries to save the rest of humanity, the survivors. So it's much more of an action-packed fighting game than Excitebike, which is just going over jumps. Mach Rider's also been considered in the past, so this isn't a character Sakurai is just pulling out of thin air. For Melee, he considered him, and his music has been in the game since Melee. Mach Rider is also sort of a precursor to some of our classic Nintendo characters. A lot of people say that the Mach Rider series was a precursor to the F-Zero series. It's a similar post-apocalyptic, futuristic type world with racing as a focus. Mach Rider himself is super macho and Captain Falcon's super macho, and they have kind of a similar look to each other. The other thing is, some people say that Mach Rider is actually a female protagonist. I believe this comes from the arcade game Mach Rider, where as you beat the game, it was slowly revealed a woman standing in front of Mach Rider's bike, his quad runner. So this is very similar to Samus in the Metroid series. So Mach Rider has some reasons to be tied to Smash and tied to Nintendo's history. Another thing is Sakurai tends to like to represent hardware of some kind. We've had this with Rob. We've had it with Duck Hunt, again with the Zapper. Wii Fit Trainer with the balance board. Game & Watch, I suppose you could say, with the Game & Watch games. So Mach Rider is actually really, really old. At least the name is to Nintendo. Mach Rider comes from a, I believe, 1972 toy Nintendo released. It didn't really look like Mach Rider. It was more of a race car, but that didn't stop Sakurai in the past for giving Mac his wireframe or repping him as the Super NES character. Both of those things don't really necessarily mean that those characters were Little Mac, but Sakurai did it anyway and represented the arcade cabinet and the Super Nintendo game alongside Little Mac. So once again, I think Mach Rider just kind of has all those things that Sakurai does with a character in Smash. So I'm thinking he's a pretty likely retro rep. I don't know if I've convinced you or if you're still on the fence about it, but I'd like to hear what people have to say. Do people think Mach Rider's a good possibility? Do you think that gun is for Mach Rider? Or are you still more in the boat that Elma and her Skell are what the gun's for? Or is it something totally different? Leave your comments below, subscribe, and until next time, have a good one.